You solved someone's sentence before they finished it. The problem underneath, not the words. They asked about the schedule. You answered the worry underneath. Have you watched a face shift because your answer arrived before their question did? The half pause, the slight lean back, that's recalibration. The psychology of an extremely high IQ has almost nothing to do with the test score. It lives in moments like that. Today we're decoding 4 angles most people never notice. The fourth changes how you read the first 3. What looks like overthinking is actually processing at a depth most rooms aren't built for. This has nothing to do with the number on a certificate. It has everything to do with what happens in the 10 seconds after you already know the answer. Angle 1, the compression. Someone hands you assembly instructions, step 1, step 2, step 3. You've already seen the finished piece. Not because you skipped the reading, but because your mind ran the whole diagram before your eyes reached step 4. This isn't reading faster, it's reading in units. Most minds process complex information sequentially, one step, then the connection, then the outcome. Yours chunks the whole sequence into a single perception. The finished piece appears before the steps do, which means when someone is walking you through a plan, halfway through, you're already living in the version where it works, or the version where it doesn't. You probably remembered a specific moment just now, the look on someone's face when you jumped ahead, in a conversation, a set of instructions, or a plan they were still building. Here's the odd part. You don't choose to compress. It fires the same way a musician hears 3 notes and knows the key. The perception arrives, then you decide what to do with it. Usually that means holding it, waiting for everyone else to catch up to what you saw 10 seconds ago. That's the version they haven't asked yet. And the longer the wait, the heavier the holding gets. You start to feel it in your shoulders before you feel it anywhere else. Angle 2. The misread. Watch what happens when 2 people finish each other's sentences at the same speed. If they arrive at the conclusion together, it reads as chemistry. If one arrives first and voices it, that person gets called a mind reader, warm, perceptive. Now watch what happens when you arrive first and voice it. Nobody calls you a mind reader. They call you impatient, or dismissive, or, worse, someone trying to prove you're smarter than the person still speaking. Same behavior, different label. And the label depends entirely on whether the person receiving it feels caught up or caught behind. That's the misattribution. Your speed isn't landing as speed. It's landing as an implicit judgment on the person you got ahead of. Nothing in your intent produced that meaning. The meaning was assigned by the gap they had to close between where you were and where they still were. Sit with this one a second. The loneliest version of intelligence isn't failing to be understood. It's being understood only after the moment has already passed. So you learn to arrive slower. Not because your processing changed, but because you'd rather be misread as thoughtful than misread as arrogant. Somewhere along the way, you started managing other people's interpretations of your speed before you could name what you were doing. Angle 3. The erasure. You fixed something before anyone knew it was broken. The reservation that would have fallen through. The ingredient that would have triggered an allergy at a birthday dinner. The math in someone's plan that quietly needed one more check. Nobody thanked you, because from where they stood, there was never a problem to begin with. This one keeps coming back. The better you do it, the less evidence survives. Something small inside you starts filing the absence of recognition as confirmation the effort didn't count. It counted. Nobody around you saw it. Anders Ericsson, a cognitive psychologist at Florida State University, spent decades studying why this happens. What he found was that expert minds compress complex information into single processing units. What takes 5 separate steps for most people, your mind runs as one pass. The result looks like ease from the outside, and ease, by definition, leaves no trace of the work behind it. Which means the better you get at this, the less visible the work becomes. Not because the work isn't there, because you've done it well enough that it disappears before anyone else arrives. The first 3 angles were about what your mind does. This last one is about what you spend every day doing to your mind because of it, and it's the one that changes how the first three land. Angle 4. The translation tax. This is the angle from the opening, the one that changes how the first three land. You slow yourself down, not because you chose to, because at some point you stopped noticing when you started. Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist at Princeton, described two systems of thinking: a fast, automatic one, and a slow, deliberate one. What the popular version of the model doesn't capture is the person who overrides the fast one, not because it's wrong, but because arriving at the answer too quickly makes everyone else responsible for catching up. Nobody chooses to feel behind. So you take the version you saw and reshape it into the version they're ready for. That reshape happens in real time, in every meaningful conversation, and it burns quiet energy nobody around you can see. The energy isn't spent on the thinking. The thinking already happened. The energy is spent on the containment, on the pacing, on the deliberate act of making the arrival look like a shared journey when you already knew the destination. The version they haven't asked yet. You've stopped offering it, not because you forgot, because you learned that arriving first and arriving welcome are different things. And that gap between the version you hold and the version the room can receive, that's where the tax collects. Now step back from all four: compression, misread, erasure, translation tax. Those aren't four separate experiences. They're four sides of the same shape. A mind that finishes patterns before others start assembling them, gets misattributed for the finishing, erases its own evidence in the fixing, and then quietly pays for the mismatch by learning to arrive later than it needs to. The processing isn't the problem. The processing is what makes you useful in ways no one thanks you for. What costs you is the constant retiming, the daily work of making your speed acceptable to a world that hasn't figured out how to receive it directly. And that work compounds. It doesn't announce itself, it just sits underneath every conversation, every meeting, every dinner where you held the observation instead of offering it. You weren't overthinking. You were finishing sentences the world hadn't started asking. That's not a defect in you. That's a rhythm the world never learned to match. The pace was always yours. The waiting was the accommodation. You've been doing this for years, translating speed into patience, depth into simplicity, three-layer answers into the one-layer version everyone else can receive. Now you have language for what that translation costs. The naming doesn't make the work lighter. It changes the story you tell yourself about carrying it. The calibration was never a flaw. It was the only bridge between where you operate and where the rest of the room could meet you. Building that bridge every single conversation, without anyone knowing it exists, takes more from you than most people will ever understand. And you've been the sole architect of that bridge every day without anyone signing the drawings. That's not a weakness. That's a literacy most rooms haven't learned to read yet. The room always caught up. That was never the problem. You might already know who this video is about. The person who answers before the question finishes and then watches everyone try to catch up. The one who quietly fixed the thing nobody noticed and carried the silence home afterward. The one who slowed down on purpose so many times that people started believing the slower version was the real one. Send this to them. Not because they need to hear it from you, but because they've spent years translating for a world that never knew there was a language gap. For once, let the person running the translation see that someone noticed the work. If this is the kind of decode that makes you stop and think, there are 3 new ones here every week. Each one takes apart a quiet pattern most people feel but have never had the words for. Subscribe so the next one finds you before someone else does. Until next time, stay observant.